Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band podcast. I am your host, Benedict Hein, and I'm here with my friend and co-host, Malcolm Owen Flood. How are you, Malcolm?
Hey, buddy. I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good, too. Let's dive into today's episode right away. And this time it's a little different because we often do these like deep dives and explain all like a lot of detailed stuff and like a lot of actionable how-to sort of stuff. This time it's something that I just want to discuss, and I also have a challenge for you, listeners, if you're listening to this, because recently I was listening to a podcast. I love the whole show. It's great. It's Andrew Scheps. And he's doing the podcast, I think, for PureMix. They're the online education platform, mixing education platform. And the podcast is called Andrew Talks to Awesome People. And he just interviews. Andrew Scheps is, if you're not familiar with him, he's one of the most successful, most famous mixing engineers on this planet. He's worked for all kinds of major artists. And he does this podcast. He's a very cool dude to listen to, too. He's at least I think so. He's got a great sense of humor and a great way of explaining things. He's as much of a scientist as he is a mixer almost.
Yeah.
And I just love hearing him explain concepts. And in this show, he interviews other mixers, engineers, people from the audio industry. And I just love these episodes. They are not edited. They're super long, in-depth conversations. And I was listening to that not long ago. And the guest on the show was Michael Brauer. And Michael Brauer is just as famous and successful as Andrew Scheps. He's worked with like Coldplay and I don't know, look up his credits, one of the biggest mixers ever. And those two giants sort of had this conversation. And there was a lot of interesting stuff in there, of course. But the one concept that I want to talk about today is they were talking about what you can do to learn the tools you have available already and why that is important. So what they were talking about is that a lot of people have so many plugins available, and even if it's just free ones, but we all have like folders full with plugins, and we have the stock plugins in our DAWs, and then we buy stuff, and there's free stuff. So we have all of these things, and most of us only ever use a couple of them, or like most of us only know a couple of them really well, if any. And what we often do is when we have a problem in the mix, we either go and search for a new tool and buy one in hopes that this will solve our problem, instead of like looking for one that we already have to solve the problem. Or we go through our plugin folders with all those plugins and we try 10 different options and hope that one of them will work.
Right.
And sometimes we're lucky and sometimes not so much. And I'm totally guilty of that too, where I try to be intentional, and I think I know a bunch of tools, but oftentimes I just go through plugin after plugin after plugin, searching for the right one, or I just look for a different solution, or I see something and think that will solve my problems. So they were talking about how there's a better way to do this, and I think they're totally right. That will lead to better mixes, a faster workflow, and also faster progress when it comes to improving your skills. And that is, they said, instead of going through all your plugins and using every single one of them once a year, try to commit to, like, say on your next, and we have to come up with a clear challenge here, but what Andrew Scheps says was, on your next 3 mixes, pick 5 plugins or so, or pick one plugin maybe even. Start with one plugin, and do not just use that one plugin, but pick one plugin that you're going to use on every single track. Like, and he's talking about EQ and compression and things that you want to use on most of your tracks.
Yeah, not a flanger.
And try, exactly, useful stuff. And then try to get the sound you want out of that one plugin. Try as hard as you can. Do whatever you can to make that one plugin work. And only if you really can't get it to work, then go to the next one. But just commit to, in the next couple of songs, pick one plugin that you really want to learn and use that across all of your tracks, even tracks that it's not like supposed to work on or something,
right.
And just try and see what the limits of this plugin are, how far you can push it, when it breaks up, when it like craps out, how much you can compress or how much you can boost, how the boosting and cutting sounds if it's an EQ, and use it on every single source, and do that for a couple of songs until you really know what that tool sounds like. And then you move on to a different one and then learn that. And when you've done that with like 5 plugins or so, you'll know those so well that next time a problem comes up, you'll know, oh, I know if I use this plugin with this setting here, this will totally solve this problem because I know what that sounds like. And I need to do this more often. I need to pick a bunch. Like, I have so many plugins, and a lot of them are very interesting, and I've always wanted to use them, but I kind of shy away of using them because I don't really know them really well. And I think it's a really cool exercise to just grab one of those, put it on across all your channels and see what you can do with it, and really, really learn it, instead of constantly throwing new things at your problems instead of learning the ones you already have. I hope that makes sense. And they both talked about that for a while and totally agreed on that. And Michael Brower was talking specifically about he did that with the Black Box saturation plugin by Plugin Alliance, where this tool can saturate, but also saturation is just like a form of compression. So it also controls the dynamics, and it's also kind of an EQ because you can saturate certain bands instead of the whole thing. So he just used that single thing like on all of his tracks, and he used it for different things. He used it to make a vocal brighter, he used it to distort things, he used it to make the bass tighter, all these things, And after doing that on like 5 songs, he really knew what the thing was doing. And now he can use it very intentionally and do cool things with it.
Yeah. That's a fascinating idea, especially if with something like a saturator. He's just like not a tool you would usually grab to cover all those bases. That's that's a lot of versatility that most people wouldn't think. Most people would say that's a one-trick pony plugin, really. Maybe not a one-trick pony. It's a great plugin, but it's it's for saturating, not for compression, not for EQ, but it totally is. If you use it that way, that's a great point.
Yeah. Have you ever done that where you got a new plugin and then you really spent the time really learning it? Because I have to admit, I rarely do this. Like, I think I know my way around a certain new plugin pretty quickly, and then I kind of know what it's doing, and then, I start using it. But it's not that I spend a lot of time, like, really learning it and using it on everything for a week or so.
Right.
And I think I should do that more often.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
And I think I should use tools on the things that I typically don't use them on, because I have so many go-tos and I'm so obsessed with like workflow and having my templates ready and all these things that I oftentimes use the same things over and over again just because I know in those cases it works. But using them differently on different sources and stuff, I think I should really do that just to change things up a little bit, to come up with new approaches and to learn a couple of tools really well. And so I don't know about you, but do you go through like an intense learning process with a new tool?
I would say only recently. Like, I know I've mentioned the Plex Tape delay plugin that I really love. That is something I've gone really deep in. I use it as a saturation plugin, not a delay sometimes. Experimenting with it as a mono plugin versus a stereo plugin is like, it may as well be an entirely different plugin. It's such a different effect you get. And seeing how far you can push it. Like, on a mix I'm working on right now, it literally just creates feedback. It doesn't sound like a vocal delay at all or a vocal at all. It sounds like an amp feeding back, like that, like weird whine. And like I didn't know I could make that out of a plugin, period, before that. So that's really, really cool. So I've just been pushing that plugin specifically just to the limits. And maybe like the, what is it called? I think it's called the Townhouse compressor by Plugin Alliance. I really know that plugin inside out, and like what happens if you push each of the ratio modes, and I use every parameter of that plugin constantly, and just know what it can do and how different those different settings can be on different materials as well, right? It of course slams on drums, but it can be so smooth on vocals if you want it to be as well.
That's a great example, actually, because I thought about that with my hardware bus comp. And bus comps in general is a great example where a lot of people buy a bus compressor because they want a bus compressor and they put it on the mix bus. They pick some common setting that a lot of people use or that they've seen somebody use online. And then that's it. That's all they ever do with it. But like an SSL style bus compressor can be or is a very versatile compressor. It's like you can use that on anything basically, but people oftentimes just find one setting and that's all they ever do with it. And they buy another one if they need a different tool when they actually have a great compressor already that they can use then. And they learn so much about it, also what it can do on the mix bus by doing that, because you learn the ins and outs of the plugin. You learn how it saturates when it breaks up, like how much compression you can actually apply to things. And I think you can only really make a good decision to switch to a different plugin when you know where the limits are. Like, how do you know? Like you have to test the limits. You have to test how extreme you can go with things and when things actually start to sound weird. Mm-hmm. And then you can be like, okay, this doesn't work. I know this other thing has more headroom or whatever. So it's interesting. It's like something I need to do more. I have some pieces where I feel like I've done that and I really know them very well. Like you said with the Townhouse, I have some of these, but the more work I did, the less I did that, because things just had to be efficient and I had my go-tos, which is fine and works and I still get what I want. But yeah, it doesn't hurt to switch things up a little bit. And I think if you're just starting out and you have the stock plugins available and maybe a couple of things that you've bought or free plugins, then this alone can be can be really overwhelming, because just what comes with a DAW is like a lot. You have a lot of plugins. And I think focusing on like one EQ, one compressor, one reverb, like the basic tools that you use on most mixes, and like really testing them and really trying, as you said, all the ratios on the compressor, different combinations of ratio and threshold settings, if there's different compression modes or saturation, whatever, just really trying all of that, like pushing all the buttons, reading the manual, testing the thing, it will get you so far. You probably find that you don't need as many other plugins as you thought you would need.
Totally. Yeah. Case in point with that SSL compressor, but like a bus compressor situation is we usually throw that on to either a drum bus or a mix bus because of how it glues in our kick and our snare, really. Like that's like the most noticeable thing. So why don't we just throw it right on a kick or a snare as a compressor for that instrument itself? It works fantastically. It sounds huge. And it's a huge superpower we have with digital workstations, where before you used to have only one of those SSL compressors built into your mixing console if you were lucky to have one, So you had to use it on the mix because you only had one. Now we have unlimited. You can run it on whatever you want. So take advantage of that. It's that tool is so powerful in those situations.
Yes, absolutely. And I think they on this podcast, they talked about real quick, like I think Michael Brower said something about Andy Wallace, where he says, at some point you're going to need a different EQ or a different compressor, and you're going to learn different things because one thing will not always do the trick unless you're Andy Wallace and like you can just use the SSL with no outboard and make the best mixes ever. Because like Andy Wallace has been known for just using, like you said, the built-in compressors on the channel strips and the built-in EQ and barely any outboard. And it just works for him. And that's because he knows that thing so well. But for most of us, we need like 2 or 3 different tools. But then we need to really know these tools so that we can make a good decision on when to use this EQ over this EQ. But we don't need all of them. We need a couple of them that we know really well. And that's much better than having all the plugins in the world. I think if you have a great channel strip and let's say some clean EQ like a FabFilter, and if you have like 2 different compressors or something, and maybe an EQ option like a Pultec or, something like that, where you have like 2 or 3 different EQs, 2 or 3 different compressors. If you know these really, really well in and out, then you can do almost everything with it. Like there's no need for 15 compressors or EQs. And so as much as that is fun, I really think that it's way better to know your tools really, really well and be able to move fast and intuitively and know exactly how to address a certain situation, and not having to guess and like go through 10 plugins in hopes that something magically works.
Yeah, totally. Just dig in, learn. It's really that simple. You already have so many more tools than you need. And again, Benny and I are so guilty of this. We are probably the most guilty. We probably own more plugins than anybody listening to this. So speaking from experience here.
Totally. So to the challenge, I would say I will do, because that was really something I wanted to try and just learn more. And it's also fun. I think exploring a tool really in depth is like something that sounds fun to me. So what I will do is I will do this with my hardware because as I said, I often reamp things or re-record things that's been sent to me just to give it some extra vibe before I start to mix. I will do this with my hardware, but I will also do this with a few plugins. So I will do on the next, let's say for the next 2 weeks or so, I will commit to picking one piece of hardware and one piece of software. I'll see how fast I can go through it, but I will commit to trying that on every single. That will take a little bit of time and will be a little slower than I'm usually working, but it's going to be worth it. And I will commit to trying that on every single source until I really think it doesn't work. Like I will use it on every single session, on every single source that it makes sense. And I will report back. I will report my findings. Maybe I have a new go-to. Maybe I've discovered something that I wish I had known earlier. I will just do that. I will pick one plugin and I will pick one piece of hardware and I will try it on everything. And who knows, maybe I will change something about my template after that.
Okay, I've got 2 ideas. I'm interested in trying to only use Pawnshop Comp 2, which is a Cornef audio compressor that I really love, but it's got like, some EQ saturation stuff available in it too. So I could feel like that could be a really good thing to deep dive on. But I would also love to try doing an entire mix only using like a module-based all-in-one thing like Ozone or Neutron or something like that, where you just it's like a one plugin situation for everything. And so I just have that on the first insert of every track and that's all I'm allowed to use. That'd be fascinating too.
That'd be fascinating too, yeah. Okay, yeah, you can do that too. If you want to limit yourself to one thing, you can do that too. I think I'm not going to limit myself to one thing. I'm just going to commit to trying
Trying it
one thing on
first.
everything.
Yeah.
Trying it first. So I'm going to use one thing in every session on every source and try it, see what I can get out of it. But the limiting thing is also cool. Like I've been saying for a while that I want to do a mix just using the stock plugins, which is not really a limitation these days, but I haven't done it in years. So
Yeah.
and so that's another thing you could do too. But yeah, the one plugin concept is fascinating too.
Mhm.
I bet you could just use, if you give me like a plugin, one of the can be Waves too, but I always use the Plugin Alliance ones. If you give me one of the good SSL channel strips, I think I could do like excluding reverb and that sort of stuff. I think I could do a complete mix with those two. With the compressor there, it has two different options even for the compressor sometimes. The EQ is pretty flexible and you have the saturation, so could do it. But I will pick one piece of gear, probably my channel strip here, my tube channel strip, my Thermionic Culture one that I have in front of me, and then I will, because that is really versatile, but I have only used it on a couple of things actually that I really love it on and not on other things. So I will use that, and then I will pick a plugin, and I probably pick the Arouser because I already love it, but I still, despite it being like my favorite compressor in the box and so great, I only ever use it on vocals, bass, and parallel kick and snare, which is kind of a lot, but that's the stuff that I always use my distressor for, but it can do so much more.
Right.
And it's so versatile, and there's so much to learn, so many parameters that I haven't even really touched yet, although I've been using it for 1.5 years. So I'm going to be using the Arouser, and I'm going to be using this channel strip that I have, and I'm going to use it on everything, and I'll see what happens.
All right. Yeah. We'll report back with our findings. Sorry, this is off topic a little bit. I mean, other than it's what you're going to be using, but what is your Thermionic Culture? What do you got? I didn't know you had one.
The Rooster. It's called the Rooster.
The Rooster. Man, I love
like
their
this
names.
Is not home recording territory really, because this is a
very high-end piece of gear. Yeah,
it is a $2,500 tube channel strip. But I mean,
there it is. Yeah, I'm looking it up right now.
I'm recording this podcast through it now, right now.
That's outrageous.
Just because I can. But I mean, I've had this thing for 9 years now, I think, and I love it. It has if there's a piece of gear that goes to 11 and also has an actual attitude switch, you just gotta buy it.
Can't beat that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, their Culture Vulture is like the thing that I would love to own, but it's so unnecessary to own.
Totally. And the distortion in mine, like the saturation circuit, the attitude circuit in mine is actually the one in the Culture Vulture, just a limited version of that, like a part of that. But it's really, really amazing. And it's so great. And I have this thing for 9 years now. Wow. And when I was recording, I used it a lot, but I haven't really, in the recording situation, you don't go that far into, usually you just boost a little bit, you cut a little bit, and you saturate, but you're careful sort of most of the time. But now when I re-record things through it, this thing is so powerful. You can do so many things, but I still use it very conservatively, and I want to really mangle things with it and learn what it can do.
Awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, you can do that with any stock thing. There's one thing in Cubase actually. If you're a Cubase user, I'm actually going to add this to my list after the two. That's the next one I'm going to explore. There's two stock plugins that I've been wanting to try for so long but haven't. Really. There's one that's called the Quadrafuzz. It's a stock Cubase plugin. It's a multi-band saturation tool that I've used with success on a couple of things, but it took me a while to figure out how to actually do it. But I was so impressed by what it can do. It's like a multi-band, saturator that I want to explore more, because every time I got it to work, it sounded so cool. And then the other one is the multi-tap delay in Cubase. That is actually, it's very similar to like what Echo Boy does. Has a couple of additional things that Echo Boy actually doesn't do. So those two are so powerful. And when I use them, I love them. But I never really use them because I don't know them enough. Right. So those two are two that I want to explore also. So it doesn't have to be the super expensive stuff. There's plenty of stock options to explore that most people probably have never really used.
Yeah, it should be stock. We should. You can't take this. Okay, no buying gear for this challenge. You have to use something you already own. Doesn't matter if you bought it previously. You can use that, but no buying new stuff.
Yes, and if you haven't used the basic stuff fully yet, like if you if you still have to explore like whatever the FabFilter EQ or your stock EQ in your DAW, so start with that. Like you don't go for the most crazy tool right away. I feel like I can confidently say I really know the SSL channel strip really well that I often use. I really know the FabFilter stuff, and I have my go-tos that I really, really know well. So I go into other plugins now that I want to explore more. But if you're just starting out, like start with those things first before you go for something complex.
Totally. This could actually save you money. You might find that you've got everything you need.
Yeah. If you got, like, say you got the FabFilter bundle and at some point, and you have the Pro C, like their compressor. I almost never use that thing, but it's so versatile. Like it has different modes, different compressor styles, and all the, like what you can do with that thing is crazy. I just haven't spent the time to really learn it, but I bet if I did, I could get away with just that as my compressor. So
yeah, probably. Actually, positively. Totally versatile enough, I'm sure.
Yeah. Anyway, enough about that. That's just something I wanted to bring up and encourage people to really do that, because I know that most of you listening now don't really know your tools, because I don't too. And so let's just learn them.
Absolutely. Last thing.
Yeah.
Recently recorded a vocal with mixed a vocal for a talented lady, and came out a little dirtier than she was hoping for. And we narrowed it down to her preamp just being recorded too hot. And it just saturates as you push that preamp. So like knowing just one knob on your interface, how that can change is interesting. Like that right there makes a difference. And like got her to record it just a little, more conservatively, and it's cleaned up. And we're not clipping. It's just that this preamp can't really handle being pushed. So it's fascinating. Just one thing like that. No, you got to know your whole chain.
Such a good thing you brought it up there, because that's one thing that I actually teach in a module in the Academy, in our flagship online course, and also in the coaching program that I have, where I tell people to try and experiment just with their input gain knob on the mic preamp on the interface for that reason. Because you'd think it's just clean gain, but I swear it sounds differently. Like whether if you crank it or you don't, you're not cranking it, and its noise changes. So that's one thing. Noise floor changes drastically if you go past a certain point. But also, it's a different sound. Like going in with little gain and then bringing it up digitally later sounds different than recording it hot. Even if you're not clipping, it's different, and you have to do it. You have to try both, bring it into your DAW, level match the two, and listen for the difference, and then you have learned something. So absolutely glad you brought that up. That's absolutely true, and I always tell people to really do that.
I think it's especially important on cheaper interfaces too.
Yes.
It makes a difference on expensive ones too, for sure, but I think the difference is more important on cheap ones, because one versus other might be quite unpleasant comparatively. So
one more thing. I know it's always one more thing, but I have one more question for you, Malcolm, just because of that topic. Kind of off topic, but also not. I've seen someone online post recently where they gave tips and like quick tips for people, and that person is someone who knows what they're doing. I'm not going to say who it was, but one of the tips was record a DI with like as hot of a signal as you can. Record it, just don't clip it. Like when you record a DI guitar into an interface, go as hot as you can. Just don't clip it, but record as hot as you can, as loud as you can.
Okay.
And I was reading that, wondering why that would be, because I never do that. I mean, I don't go in super quietly, but I just, same as with especially if I go directly into an interface, it's sort of the same as we just described with the mic gain. I'm still doing it conservatively, and I've never found it to sound better if I record hot. So, and do you have any thoughts on this? Can you explain why that is?
Yes, I actually agree. I even clipping.
I agree with the clipping too, but just getting it as hot as possible, but not clipping it. That's the part I didn't understand.
Saying that even clipping it is fine.
Yeah. Totally. I get that part. I intentionally clip sometimes. Yeah. But like going close to clipping, but not clipping it, I couldn't see why that would be, because I would just bring it up later.
Like I've got a Vintech 1073 in front of me right now. And if I run it hot, I saturate it. Essentially, that's what happens. The hotter I run it, not necessarily clipping, it does dirty, it does saturate, it does round off my transients in a nice way. It's like more excited harmonic, essentially.
But now we're not talking about the stock DI in an interface, right? That's a different story. I mean, I do that all the time with my expensive preamps, but just plugging into an interface, would there be any benefit to just cranking that?
No, I don't think so.
Because I think that's what they were talking about.
It totally could. Like I said, this vocal example, that was distorting mildly
Okay.
as you recorded hotter. So I guess in theory, you're saturating your DI if you're doing that to some extent. Is it
Okay.
saturation that will react well with an amp? I have no idea. So I guess really you'd have to experiment there. Yeah. Hard to say.
Yeah, I've never heard that argument. I know about the clipping, and I totally agree with the preamp saturation and all of that. And I love like distorting DIs while I'm recording them, but just the like leaving it clean with a standard like stock DI and just bringing it up as much as I can without clipping. I just didn't know why I would do that. But I have to. Maybe I want to look into that further. I don't know.
You might like that the level it throws into an amp sim after that point. Maybe that just gets you closer, but you could just turn it up,
That was the question though, because the question that he answered was tips on like optimizing the DI and stuff for reamping.
Right.
And I was like, that was one of his tips. And I was like, yeah, but you can just record it quietly and bring it up later. Like you can always adjust the level going into the
And I think
box.
with like a cheap plugin, you're probably better off doing that. And then if you want to saturate it with an exciter or something before it hits an amp sim, that's probably wiser. Yeah. I mean, but
maybe there's something that I don't think about. Maybe there's some impedance thing or whatever. I don't know
what I could see happening is somebody records really quiet thinking it doesn't matter, and then they throw in an amp sim and it's not driving the amp sim hard enough and it sounds terrible. That's like such a silent killer where if you're not experienced with gain staging and your amp sim plugin, you might have lackluster results, and it's just like, it sounds weak, it's not driving this amp sim, quotation marks in the air for listeners. So like that, and if you recorded loud, you'd be hitting it harder already, maybe getting what you expected. So, but as long as you know to, feed it what it wants with, there's always an input control volume knob or something, you're going to be fine. We're way off topic.
Totally off topic. But I don't know. That's just something I wanted to ask you anyway. So let's just keep it in this episode. And it goes back to and it's kind of on topic because that's just the fact that I can't answer this for sure just means I need to plug in a guitar and experiment with that more and then see if there's a difference. And maybe I'll find something that I haven't thought about. So
tied it back in, covered our ass. Nice work.
Exactly. All right.
We're like Malcolm Gladwell, where it seems like we're talking about something else, but we're actually talking about the topic. Can I compare us to Malcolm Gladwell?
I think not. Nobody should ever compare themselves to Malcolm Gladwell. But
I've got the same name, and we're both Canadian.
Right? You're close.
Canadian,
you're close. Yeah,
pretty sure
definitely. He's Canadian also. Is he Canadian?
I think so. Okay, we got to Google it now. There's no way to make this also on brand or on topic, but
I would recommend reading Malcolm Gladwell books because they're great.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with that. English-born Canadian journalist. There we go. Close enough.
I think we gotta end this episode.
Yes, I think so too.
because otherwise I will start talking about how I saw this interview with Malcolm Gladwell where he
You're doing it right now.
Malcolm. Yep. Malcolm. Just go. I'm not saying it. Just Google Malcolm Gladwell on riding a bike or bicycles or something. You will, after watching this, you will question the whole concept of a bicycle, and you will probably think it's the dumbest thing that people ever invented. After hearing him talk about how stupid it is to ride a bike. Or how stupid the whole concept is. Just Google that.
Okay.
I'm going to leave you with that. And thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks everyone. If you're still here, is anybody out there? Hello? Awesome.
Bye.
Okay, we'll see you next week.